Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.
You would think that I am in a very bad mood today. Only about 10 months since purchasing my car and putting only about 48,000 miles on it. My transmission is going out in the car. Do you think I'm going to be in a bad mood? Do you think I'm going to be laid back? Do you think I'm going to be quiet today? No! Life happens. Yellow again, everybody. Yeah! It's Randy Hales, right along ringside, broadcasting from where my story began. Jonesboro, Arkansas. We're ready to go. We're talking Memphis Wrestling. Jeremy's in the house. PJ's in the house. Nicholas is in the house. Scott Art in the house. All kinds of people in the house. PJ, what are you doing, man? As Nicholas says, Randy's about going crazy. I'm fired up, ready to go, ready to turn around, jump up and down, ready to go. And we're going to take this show back the way it first started. Only me and Pat today, but we can do it with good stuff. Hello, Al Tuttle. Hello, everybody else. And hey, Bo James. You see, even though my transmission's going out in my car, I'm fired up. I am not going to take it out on my audience at all. The damn straight, Nicholas. It is electric time in his house in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and we're bringing it in the way it was from the get-go. Me and Pat. Pat, I'm excited. And how about your first take today? Did Alabama win this weekend?
Oh, it was a tough weekend for the Crimson Tide, but we'll get there. Hello to everybody. Reverend Terry, good to see you. Thank you for setting the rules of the road. Bo, Randy West, good to see Al, Brad, BC, everybody. I hate to say it because I'd miss everybody, and you're all my dear friends, and I could not put up with Randy without your support. So, good morning, good afternoon to you, Randy.
You know, Terry thinks he's actually in charge here. Good afternoon to you. Life is good in the Trammell household, I'm assuming.
Well, life is fine. The oldest seems to have found gainful employment, so I'm happy about that.
Oh, tell me about it.
And yeah, he's gonna
Or
work for a
should that be off the clock?
well, probably off the clock.
You
I
have
don't
not
want to
told
jinx
me. And
him.
how many times do I ask
Well,
my wife?
I just found out today. Starts work Monday. Excited about that.
Can you tell
Um,
me if it's in Memphis,
it's not in Memphis. It's in Birmingham.
in Birmingham, so he's staying at home?
Staying at home right now. I guess we'll figure out how that works. So anyway.
How about LL from Canada 2 days in a row? She is saying hello to Team Hales. Hey Pat, do you want to do a first take or did you do it?
I think I just did it. That's been the most exciting thing to happen today. So very excited about that. Been a lot of consternation, gnashing of teeth, and uh, young people think the world needs to come to them. They have to go to the world. So everybody's learned the lesson. We've got it with some good folks, and we'll see where he goes. And
Richard
hey,
Hood is in the house. Richard Hood is here saying hello to you, Pat. In case we have audience members, as Thomas Lemon is saying hello, we have audience. Man, I don't know what the hell's wrong with them, but some of them could have missed the show last week. I know you're getting old. You are old. But do you remember what we talked about last week? Because if you do remember, I'm going to have you share that with our audience. And you have
I,
paper in front of you, hopefully.
Well, it's kind of weird with this computer about paper, but I did remember, and I'll tell you, that's we were back to the old days, and it was one of my favorite shows in a while. We're talking about historical, back to the roots, Memphis wrestling. our best ofs, our worst ofs, what our favorites were from decades going back 50 years. That's one half of century. And Randy, could you mention our friend Bo's request here?
Of course, I know what I'm doing, Pat. I am a professional, and I just wasn't going to talk over your ass. And I want Adam, if he would, put the name down. By the way, Randy West, I appreciate you watching today. Enjoyed you helping me out with advice about the car today. Man, Randy and I was talking. Randy and I have known each other for probably 50 years. He's never ever been mad at me. I've never ever been mad at him. No cross word ever. Hey, let's put Bose up there again, please, so I can read it as we can put that up there again. Hey, RH, can you tell the people that Southern States Wrestling is doing a benefit for flood victims this Saturday at the Armed Forces Center, 399 Highway 11 West, Mount Carmel, Tennessee, just 1 mile west of Kingsport. It's 7:30. You can go to the Southern State Wrestling Facebook page, website, whatever they do, and you can check that out. Again, Bo is requesting everybody support their benefit for the floods that East Tennessee and Western North Carolina got. Their event Saturday night at the Armed Forces Center, 399 Highway 11 West, Mount Carmel, Tennessee. So certainly glad to do that. Now let's look at some of the other stuff. Pete is asking, were you fans of Coco and Norvell as PYT? Pat can answer for himself, and I'll answer for myself.
I was a huge fan of the PYTs. I think that was one of the best booking decisions that was made in that era.
Do you know how much they were used on Top Pad? How many main events they did, and how much the money they drew?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line, right? That's the bottom line. Now, we have Crystal Ball says, hey, how do you both feel about the new NWA and the new tag team champions, the Rock and Roll Express? Did not know that. And Pat, you keep up with the NWA much more than I do.
I do, and I'll tell you, Cristobal, I'm for the NWA. I think there's. I've always thought there was something there. I think Billy has put his heart, soul, and
Money?
checkbook into that. Yeah, I think he has. And I don't know how rich he really is. I do know from just being around you and Jerry Jarrett and other people in the industry, the way to turn a big fortune into a small fortune is getting the wrestling business with something that doesn't draw. But Billy's had a, probably a, my goodness, 7 or 8 year run with that thing now.
Yes.
And continues to add some territories, continues to kind of work it in the old style. So, I guess Kerry Morton, who was with at a night to remember, is one of the new Rock and Roll Express, and I'm pulling for them all the way.
All right, we're going to talk in depth about the 80s, but I want to look back, Pat, and I want to talk about the 70s and tell you maybe some stuff you know, some stuff you guys don't know. And I want to say hello to my friend from Carolinas, BC Collins. We're going to talk about the 70s, and we want to start in 1971, Pat. I think that's a very good starting place because that is the year the debut of Memphis Wrestling at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. In 1971, wrestling premiered at the Mid-South Coliseum on June the 7th, 1971. June the 7th, 1971, at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to read you that card. Now, at that point, it was the biggest crowd to date for wrestling in Memphis because they had been running downtown on a building that didn't hold what the Mid-South Coliseum held.
That was
This,
at the Cook Center, Randy.
well, it was the Ellis Auditorium at the time. It ended up the Cook Convention Center, but at that point, it was the Ellis Auditorium.
Okay. Okay.
This first debut card drew 9,253 people, and I thought it'd be interesting to know this card. The opening match was Gary Martin against Oni Wiki Wiki. The second match was Tinker Todd against Mario Galento. Then the third match was a mixed match, Darlin Dagmar and Cora Combs defeating Diamond Lil and Miss Ann Casey. The fourth match was a tag team match. Mike York and Frank Monty, the Alaskans, against the tag team of Bearcat Brown, the big cat Bearcat Brown from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Frank Hester. The fifth match of the night was for the NWA Women's Championship. Vicky Williams challenging champion Fabulous Moolah. Then for the Southern Junior Heavyweight Championship, the champion Lynn Rossi defeated the Diamond Ring Cadillac Man, Sputnik Monroe. Then the seventh match on the card, and I'm sure this is the most matches they've ever had at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. Remember, we're taking a look right now. Reading the card for the very first wrestling event at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee, June the 7th, 1971. The seventh match is NWA Tag Team Champions Carl and Kurt Von Bronner against the tag team of the fabulous Jackie Fargo and Roughhouse Fargo. The main event, Don and Al Green beat Southern Tag Team Champions Jerry Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto by disqualification in a hair versus title match. Steve Clements' hair was on the line if the Greens lost. So that's the first thing. We're going to go year to year, or mostly year to year, Pat, in the 70s. What did you think? I spent a lot of time on that, but it's significant. Very significant. What's your thoughts?
Did that start at 5 in the afternoon and go to 2 the next morning? How many matches is that? 12, 10, 8, 10?
Just 8.
Okay. Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, it's obvious that that's not the Memphis that we know. That's the Goulas Welch. That's the Goulas Welch top of the house card right there. Bringing in Bearcat, Lynn Rossi, who rarely wrestled Memphis. They were bringing their premier talent from all over the territory.
Now, you're right. It was a Goulas Welch show, but the booker on the Memphis end was who?
Jerry Jarrett, I would assume.
Absolutely, 100%. He'd been booking the Ellis Auditorium. He'd been booking since 1979. Let's go back and get some of these comments. Richard Hood says, Randy, who had the first scaffold match? It happened in 71 or 72 in Louisville, Kentucky. Jerry Jarrett and Don Green. Let's see what Brian K. Stevens has to say as we see what Brian has to say. So I remember all the way back to Tommy Rich was a rookie, I believe, when he to a ring that Plowboy,
that was the ring it was
that
Lawler.
was a Plowboy Frazier thing from Jerry Lawler, and Tommy Rich ended up certainly being involved in that angle. You're exactly right. That's one thing, Pat, I would give anything to see, and there's no video of that at all.
Of that ring thing?
I've never seen it. Except when I saw it live as a 10-year-old.
Somehow, and I mean, you would know, but I thought I had seen that. But maybe not. I remember, it seems like I remember, and maybe I'm just imagining it because Jerry told me the story. of him explaining to Plowboy that Lawler was just monking him, and then they didn't they hit the didn't they hit the didn't they hit the ring with a sledgehammer or something?
Yeah, he said, Playboy, diamonds, uh, uh, you can't break with a hammer. Glass you can. This is a
Okay,
fraud. And then he hit the thing, and the thing busted a million pieces, and it went for under the ring. It was great visual. It was
okay,
absolutely. And Brian Stevens says he can't find a copy of that
okay.
either.
Well, maybe I'm just imagining it.
Steve Elm is asking, is that Pat Hutchison? Is who Pat Hutchison? Steve, let me know that. The Love Master say, hey, Randy, who in your opinion was the most dangerous wrestler to ever wrestle in Memphis? I think there's a whole list of people. I think you have to say Rafael Fargo, you have to say the Moondogs, you have to say Terry Funk, and it's how they're booked. It's remember that it's how they're booked. If they're booked to be wild and crazy, if they're not booked to be wild and crazy, they won't be wild and crazy. I want to put that picture, either that picture or another picture of the Mid South Coliseum up there, because I want to tell you about another card. I want to go to August the 8th, 1972. Remember, June the 7th, 1971 was the debut of the Mid South Coliseum Wrestling, June 71. In August of 72 was the first sellout at the Mid South Coliseum and one of Jerry Jarrett's most brilliant deals. And remember, the very first card, the main event, was Jerry Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto against Don and Al Green. And this is this card at the Mid South Coliseum in 1972. It's Oni Wiki Wiki against Joe Blassie. Tommy Gilbert defeated Corsica Joe. 6'6", 276, Big George Holt beat Tony Charles. Then the tag team of Cowboy Frankie Lane and Eddie Marlin beat Don Green and Sir Steve Clements. And then in a 2 out of 3 fall, no disqualification, hair versus hair match, Al Green was also defending his brother Don's U.S. Junior Heavyweight title, and if he lost, the Greens and manager Sir Steve Clemens would have to leave Memphis. 2 out of 3 falls. First fall, Jackie Fargo pinned Green. Second fall, Green pinned Jackie Fargo. Third fall, Al Green by TKO over Fargo. Fargo agreed to that match in a crying, emotional interview when Al Green, again, Jerry Jarrett's fine work when he had Al Green make fun of Jackie Fargo's dead daddy because Fargo had refused for a hair match. Al says, what would your dead coward dad think? His son's just like him and be and end up a coward. It drew 10,653 people, and at that point, that was a sellout at the Mid South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. No doubt about that. That card is the second thing. We're looking at 1979, Pat. What do you think about that fabulous card?
I think just the um, having Jackie Fargo and Al Green, and I think Jerry says that he got the Greens kind of out of retirement, one of the Greens, but
Al.
Al, but those guys were terrifying to me as a child. They were just like the baddest asses you ever saw.
What else on that card, Pat?
Well, I just clipped it off. Hold on. I had it up. Um, I can't
There was
think of it.
interesting things on the card as well as real quick. I will read the last three matches. It was just a 5-match card. I'll do the whole card. Only Wiki beat Joe Blassie. Tommy Gilbert beat Corsica Joe. George Holtz beat Tony Charles. Frankie Lane and Eddie Marlin beat Don Green and Steve Clements. And Al Green beat Jackie Fargo. 2 out of 3 fall. This is a Tuesday show that drew 10,553 people.
Now, Corsica Joe wrestled into his 80s. Is that right? Isn't that the guy that New Jack beat up?
That was Gypsy Joe.
Gypsy Joe. Okay.
Yes. Corsica Joe did not. Let me answer Richard Hood's question. Yes, Richard. Ron Wright and Don Wright, both of them wrestled in Memphis. Not a whole lot, but they held the Southern Tag titles and they drew some money for that. That's an impressive looking card. And Pat, if you didn't know, now you know. The very first sellout of the wrestling at the Mid-South Coliseum, and I'll have you help me out by reading Brian Stevens' question.
Talk about the greatest match ever, which was a Tupelo concession stand brawl with Lawler and Dundee versus the Blonde Bombers, which was right after Jerry Jarrett split from Goulas, I believe. I think it was a little bit after that, right?
2 years after. The Jarrett switch was 77.
Randy, let me ask you something about the Mid-South Coliseum versus the Cook Convention Center. What did the downtown venue seat?
About 6.
So this is what is fascinating to me. They went from filling up a 6,000 seat venue to one almost double the size within a period of weeks or months. Is that right?
They were at the Ellis Auditorium, which later became
the Cook County Convention Center
on a Monday night, and then they announced they're going to do some work on the Ellis Auditorium, so we're moving to the Mid-South Coliseum. We'll be back in 6 months here, but they never returned unless there was an off night and we couldn't get the Mid-South Coliseum. It was never a plan because Nick Goulas was scared of going to the fairgrounds and getting away from downtown. He was scared of that, but they had no choice because they were closing up temporarily the Ellis Auditorium.
See, that I never knew that, and I bet nobody on here ever knew that. I thought they just moved there because it was a bigger venue.
No, Jerry Jarrett knew that it could make it go for sure. Hey, Todd Alexander's what's going on, and Pat, we've said so many times that that's what this show is about, because we know when we're talking about the 70s, Pat, obviously you know the 70s. But you didn't grow up in Memphis, you grew up in Birmingham. A lot of the people weren't born in the 70s. And so
That's right.
This is such a great era of Memphis wrestling. And I'm just we talked significantly about the best babyface, best heel, best booker, all that stuff. But I wanted to just run through these years. 71, first event at the Mid-South Coliseum. The second year, 1972, August 8th, that was the first sellout of the Mid-South Coliseum. And I will grab.
Randy, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I must have clicked my.
Okay, now you're good.
Because I was messing around. We're going to go to 1973. Many sellouts. The territory changed from mean, big heel tag teams like the Interns, Don and Al Green and the Von Bronners, to a bumping tag team of Jerry Lawler before he was the King and Jim White. They sold out record crowds. By that point, more bleachers were put in, more seatings, was doing 11,500 people on a regular basis, and it was Jerry Lawler and Jim White with Sam Bass feuding with Jackie Fargo, Tojo Yamamoto, and Jerry Jarrett, and that was amazing. Then in 1974, we'll go right through that, and we'll get to the 80s, and we'll, of course, catch up with some of these questions. So, Adam, if you keep up with the ones we hadn't talked about, if you can. And let me just real quick, Shane, the Coliseum, basically, there was, in later years, there was a minimum, but basically it was a percentage. The Coliseum would get like 12.5% of the net proceeds after taxes. That's how that was taken care of. So 73 was a great year. 1974, my favorite year in Memphis wrestling. It's the most attended year. Now, we had money years later on. We'll get into that in the 80s, but not a month, maybe anywhere in the world, had attendance like the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee in 1974. Record attendance as Jerry Lawler became the king and the road for the gold. And Adam, if you want to put that back up there, and I will answer that question. Hi, Randy. How is Jerry Lawler's health is doing? He was at the Tiger at the Liberty Bowl this week during a personal appearance in wrestling there, and hadn't seen him since September, but appreciate you asking about him, Mark. Want to do some more questions? Todd says, when did you know, Randy Hales, that the Mid-South Coliseum had ran run its course? About the same time I knew that Memphis wrestling as a territory and every other territory in the world had run its course in the mid 80s. And we limped along to 96 to doing weekly matches at the Mid-South Coliseum. But yeah, with WWF going national, that's what started it, and every territory going away.
Randy,
Bo, go ahead, Pat.
no, go ahead. Go ahead and answer Bo's question. Then
How
I'll.
hard was it to get in and out of the Ellis Auditorium since it was downtown? Since I never went to that section of it, Bo, I don't really know. People downtown probably walked. I don't know about the parking. When it became, or they built onto it, and part of that venue became the Cook Convention Center, and I was there whenever we could not get dates on the Mid-South Coliseum. And for the talent, for the wrestlers, for the promotion, it wasn't hard because I thought it was the coolest thing. Hey, Barry, hey, my buddy, what's going on? Hey, Joe, what's going on? Thinking Monday Night Wrestling in Memphis at the Coliseum better than Monday Night Raw. Appreciate that. So, Pat, it was pretty cool that at the Cook Convention Center, the crew could park in the basement. I thought that was cool. And Richard
Yeah,
Hood says, wasn't Johnny Walker a mainstay in Memphis back in the 70s, the late 60s, into the 70s, more the late 60s than the 70s? So I'll turn it back over to Pat, who tried to get a word in, but I interrupted him.
well, that's okay. I was looking at the Ellis Auditorium about where that was, and it's at the corner of Poplar and Front Street. And I think there's a fairly for a downtown venue. I think it's a lot like the Boutwell Auditorium in Birmingham. There's some parking area around there,
Oh
but
yeah, across the street and that sort of thing. Tell the people the Memphis Convention Center now. Tell everybody who sponsors that, what bank.
that is Renaissance Bank, which is my employer currently, and we're proud of that. So you can see it if you're coming across from Arkansas and look on the right. It's right there on the river, and you can see the Renaissance sign. And I have not been in there since they redid it, but I understand it's a fabulous facility. Ahmad, good to see you, my friend.
I
Um,
appreciate everybody watching tonight. This is great. I think people really like us getting back to our roots and just talking Memphis wrestling.
yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Answer Shane's question. And Shane, let me just say this, and this is not mean to be an insult for Pat. Pat is it'd be the same thing for me about the Birmingham Basketball Auditorium. So answer Shane's question.
Shane, I've never been in there in my life except when I snuck in, so I've never seen a match or a concert in there. So
Whose idea was the Coliseum when the Coliseum closed, and it didn't close. We just it became expensive, and we're having trouble drawing, and that was a decision between Jerry Lawler and me. Lawler more than me. Al Tuttle says, besides the LLT 683 match, what's your favorite Coliseum match? Uh, you were in the crowd watching and not calling the match with Lance. Probably 1977 Harley Race Jerry Lawler. Probably 1977 Harley Race and Jerry Lawler.
Randy, is there footage of Lawler and Briscoe?
Yes, and we've showed that on this show before.
Okay.
We
Okay.
can do it again sometime.
No, I think yeah, I remember seeing that. We showed that about 6 months ago, I think. Six or
So
eight
what a
months ago.
year that 1974 was. 1975 was an interesting year. As I said, folks, this will help if I have my microphone in my hand, my gimmick kayfabe microphone. Hello, Randy West. Thanks for sending me this microphone. I love this. Randy, do you like my set with this great picture that Scott Sark did? This great belt, the rivalry through the ages. We have a lot of cool things going now, people. A lot of cool things going now as we're talking 70s. Little break. Yeah. By the way, Adam, anytime you see Pat yawning, make me go full screen, please. Let's be a little professional around here. He works so hard, so I don't blame him for getting tired doing these things. He's not tough as me because I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning. And I've had a stressful day, and you don't see me yawning. All you see me doing is dipping on the program, which is not good as well. Lester, what's going on? I miss Lady Tojo. Richard says, is there any footage of Tommy Rich's debut match? No, I don't think so. Randy West likes our set, and we appreciate everybody watching. And we'll go to 1975. After all those record houses, Pat, that we talked about, Lawler, the road to the gold, Russell Jack Briscoe, all the stuff that happened, unbelievable, unbelievable business, especially July was tremendous attendance wise at the Mid South Coliseum, like 14 straight in the summer sellouts, maybe 16 or 17. It was unbelievable. That how 74 ended. 1975, the first thing Jerry Jarrett did was fire Jerry Lawler. That's the first thing he did. Your thoughts on that?
Now that was the Lawler wanted more money, right?
No.
Okay. He actually fired him.
Yes, that was an angle later on. That was part of the story. He actually fired him because to say one thing about Jerry Jarrett, there was rules, and in that era, it didn't matter if you're the top town, the guy that just set records that had never been set before and never been set before. But Jerry Lawler was booked in Johnson City, Tennessee on Tuesday, and he was in Memphis on Monday, and he just didn't want to go. He just didn't want to go. So Jerry Jarrett fired his ass. His
Okay.
main event guy drawing the money. But this is the thing. He knew if he let Jerry Lawler do that, everybody else would do it and say, well, you did not fire Jerry Lawler. Well, he did. And Lawler was gone for 7, 8 months. And at that time, they brought in Ron Fuller as a heel and had the Mongolian Stomper, had the Magnificent Zulu, and they did sellouts there. So that was interesting. And then also in 75, of course, Ron Fuller became Southern champion. He wrestled Jack Briscoe in the NWA World Title matches. Tommy Rich debuted there in the year 1975. A tag team called George Barnes and Bill Dundee. Lawler came back. Barnes left. Dundee switched babyface. That one last thing he put up there, Adam, I just, let's see. Richard Hood said, Randy, do you remember when Dusty Rhodes showed up in Memphis to take on Jerry Lawler? That was in 1977. 1977. And Brian, I was going to get to that in a minute as we're going to do 1976, but we'll go ahead and go with that 1976 because in 1976, Lawler's long-term manager Sam Bass, along with the Mass Dominoes, passed away around exit 169 eastbound in a car wreck. That's who was with him, the Dominoes, and how Lawler found out. Lawler found out because him and photographer Mike Shields was behind them, and they got at the point of the interstate, and the interstate was closed. They got out of the car, walked up, and it was Sam Bass's car on fire. I don't want to rush through that at all. Pat, comments on that. Help me with that.
Well, I think I called you about 2 months ago. I was traveling from Memphis to Nashville, and to ask exactly where it was because I remember Lawler telling the story of it was right on the other side of the bridge. So I was trying to figure out exactly where it was, and I did. And
And you know what? Randy West is a historian like me. Obviously, Randy was in the Eddie Marlin family by then, by 1976. However, he wasn't on the road yet. Sam's car wreck was after Lawler wrestled Harley Race on Monday night, and it was either at the 167 or the 169. That's just 2 miles apart, so it's one or the other.
I,
Randy, do you remember? Go ahead, Pat.
Well, yeah, that's right because you said 169, and it may have been on the other side of 169 because I remember Lawler talking about there being a bridge there, and at 168 there's a bridge, and then there's 169. So I mean, it's right there in the middle of it, and of interest. And I don't know exactly where they were going, but of interest to our listeners, and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong. Jerry Jarrett made everybody in Memphis live in Nashville or not in Memphis. He didn't want the boys living in town. Is that correct?
Well, I don't honestly know if it was a Nick Gulas, Roy Welch rule or a Jerry Jarrett rule. I'm not sure.
Okay, okay. Well, I had thought it was a Jerry rule, and I think once Lawler uh, got to the point where he said, "No, we're not working together anymore. We're partners now." I think he moved. That's when he moved back to Memphis.
And Randy says it was before you get to Dixon, Tennessee, exit
Okay.
eastbound, and he's correct on that. In 1976, Lawler's Army, a great faction. There was more Lawler Fargo action. Dundee became the top baby face, teamed with many people, Rocky Johnson, Tommy Rich, and more. 1976, Terry Funk came in to win the NWA World Title. Tommy Rich was a big part of that year as well. 1976 and 77 started something new. Big news in 1977. Here's Pat Trammell to tell you about what happened in March of 1977 when things changed big time.
Well, things changed big time because Jerry Jarrett took the territory over, and it became Memphis wrestling as going forward as we knew it. Now, prior to that, it certainly was Memphis wrestling, and the blueprint was there. But from then on, it would be the Memphis wrestling. I think that started on the course and the career that so many wrestlers had and so many fans had.
No doubt about it. 77 was just tremendous. Went from Channel 13, WHBQ TV, to Channel 5 in March or April of 1977. Everything changed at that point. Also in 1977, Harley Race was in action against Jerry Lawler. And then uh, Dude by the name of Handsome Jimmy Valiant, and there's WMC TV5 because it changed from Channel 13, the ABC affiliate. Adam would be very good if he could put up a picture on the quick with Channel 13. Don't know about that, but that's a great picture of WMC TV, the tugboat and mail. Man, that is giving me absolutely chills, absolutely chills. In 1977 was the famous part one of the Lawler Dundee feud. It started July of 1977, lasted through October, and then here came a mean, crazy heel that later became one of the most popular people, and this past September became a member of the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame. He's from New York City. The boy from New York City, raised by a gypsy. Handsome Jimmy Valiant. So 1977 is just a great, great year. Great year. Now, as I told you, Adam can do it. That's the current day version of WHBQ TV, Channel 13, on Highland Drive in Memphis, Tennessee. Frank, just give me a moment and I will tell you when that date was. As I talked about a lot of things there. Pat's gonna go full screen, and I'm gonna do a little research. Pat, stretch this
Well,
out for me.
Jimmy Valiant or Bo James, wrestling pop, as he said, got the opportunity to spend a good bit of time with him, and had not met Handsome Jimmy at the event in Dixon, Tennessee, or in Jackson, Tennessee. A night to remember, and what a prince of a guy. But one of the things that I think of, and I'm going to at some point get on YouTube or let Adam help me um, put what is available in order, chronological order, so I can walk it. But when you think of Memphis wrestling as we know it, as the Jarrett Memphis wrestling territory, you know, obviously Tojo remained with Nick Goulas, and I think somebody else did it. I forgot who it was, but anyways,
Fargo.
and Fargo remained
Yeah.
with Nick. So two of the biggest stars in Memphis wrestling history didn't stay. If Bill Dundee doesn't show up, and if he and Lawler don't embark on a legendary feud that gets over like probably no two people in the history of Memphis wrestling, we may not be sitting here today. Um, and so I think you
I don't think
can't.
that. I don't agree with that.
You
I
don't
don't
agree
agree.
with that?
With Jerry Jarrett, even though I've said my negatives on him, he would have made that happen. Just like firing, I told the story in '75. He fired Lawler and then brought in Ron Fuller and then brought in Bill Dundee and George Barnes, and then he did it. Here's any number of things that you could have done in '77. You could, if you could have still uh, done the same sort of deal in 1977 with Tommy Rich and Lawler, Rocky Johnson and Lawler. By the way, I forgot to tell you in 1976, I mentioned some stuff there. Lawler's Army, more Fargo and Lawler, Dundee is a babyface, Rocky Johnson debut, Terry Funk around, and Tommy Rich around. I don't know if it would have done that kind of business, but Lawler and Dundee didn't do like the road of attendance wise. Lawler and Dundee didn't do like Lawler's Road to the Gold in 1974. It just didn't. We
Yeah.
remember things different for uh, sure. And let's go uh, to Frank Seaton's question, and help me here, Adam, with putting something in the background so I can read this card, and that will help me there. Just a Coliseum shot or something like that to answer Frank Seaton's question that you see right there. On December the 18th, 1977, at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee, on a Sunday night, drawing 9,664 people. The opening match, Ken Dillinger, the Samoans, beat Frankie Lane, David Schultz, and Sonny King. The second match of the evening, Mr. Wrestling, Dick Steinburn, beat Tommy Gilbert. The third match for the Southern Tag Team Championship, Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey beat Norvell Austin and Robert Gibson. This is December 18th, 1977. Then the fourth match, Bill Dundee and Big Red beat the Mongolian Stomper and Gorgeous George Jr. And then a NWA World Heavyweight Championship match, December the 18th, 1977, drawing 9,664 people. NWA World Heavyweight Champion Harley Race beat Jerry Lawler via a forfeit in a no disqualification match after Lawler was attacked by Handsome Jimmy Valiant before the match. How about that, Pat? Are we deep diving in to the history?
It is it is a deep dive, and I learned something I never knew. I never knew Handsome Jimmy uh, got Lawler disqualified in that match.
Really? I
No,
thought
I
we
never knew.
showed that too.
We may have, but it slipped my mind if it did. But it makes sense because if you're you it's you can't lose a belt on a disqualification, and so Harley's got to leave with the belt, and Lawler has to give over, and that's the way to get him over.
Hey, not much left in the 70s, and we're wrapping up the 70s. And I changed this from last week, and the reason I did, I thought it would be interesting to go year to year. We looked at 77 just now, so we've done 71, 72, 73, 4, 5, 6, and 77. 78, Lawler and Dundee became a babyface tag team. Handsome Jimmy Valiant and Lawler feud continued. Valiant ended up switching babyface. Joe LeDuc debuted. He came in with John Louis and Sonny King, and that was great. Also, in 1978, a big deal. Memphis Wrestling, Jarrett Promotions left the NWA and joined the AWA, and Nick Bockwinkel in 1979, or 1978, I'm sorry, this is 78, Nick Bockwinkel made his debut. Real rapid fire. What do you think about how 78 looked, Pat?
I think it was a obviously putting Lawler and Dundee together as a tag team was a stroke of genius. Joe LeDuc, I think, will go down as one of the biggest heels in Memphis history. Uh, One thing we haven't talked about a lot, Randy, and I'd like your opinion on the shift to the AWA, and Jared has talked about why he wanted to do that. Uh, what was your opinion of Nick Bockwinkel as a champion?
I think he's probably my favorite world champion of any federation ever. I thought he's typical, classy, fantastic. He wasn't a yeller or a screamer, and he was a wrestler. He was a wrestling heel. I can't talk any better about Nick Bockwinkel. I mean, he just fantastic. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And Richard, I more before my time watching wrestling in the 60s, but I think that Harley Race did wrestle, maybe not in Memphis, but in Nashville as Jack Long, or maybe it's not wasn't Jack Long, but the last name was Long. Do you have any idea on that, Pat?
Yeah, I do, and I think he probably came through for a cup of coffee in Memphis. And I saw that in somebody's book, and I actually saw it on a card, and somebody may have been one of Mark James's books. But yeah, I think he did move through here, and he worked. He worked as Jack Long in Birmingham in the late '60s, so I'm sure he had some matches in Memphis throughout the kind of working throughout the territory.
Let's finish 1979, Pat, and then to give Adam a heads up as we approach an hour into this show, I'm going to call for something, whether it's re-showing the Talking Memphis Wrestling Open, re-showing the countdown. We just need a transition coming up, and I will pitch to that as we will get in the most profitable year, probably the most famous decade of Memphis wrestling, and that is the 1980s. But let's finish up 1979. Here is the notes that I wrote for this. Robert Fuller came in as the booker. For the first time since 1969, Jerry Jarrett was not booking Memphis and the territory. Just too much changes at one time. Different booking philosophy. Robert Fuller is a successful booker. Absolutely. Record business in Knoxville, record business in Pensacola, crappy business in Memphis. It just didn't work. And that happens, folks. That happens. Robert Fuller came in as the booker, a completely new crew. Business was down, a lot of people fired, and he ended up getting fired. How did Jerry Jarrett turn it around in 1979? We mentioned it early. The Tupelo concession stand brawl that was just absolutely unbelievable. The Blonde Bombers, Wayne Ferris, Larry Latham, Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, the whole crew left. The whole crew left when Robert Fuller was fired. And what did they go with? Jerry Jarrett. Brilliant. I use that a lot for Jerry Jarrett in wrestling booking. And in general, he was a smart, real intelligent, well read guy. There's no doubt about that. He came up, saved the territory. You think better when your livelihood's at stake, Pat. I don't know if you, I'm sure your decisions, maybe not creatively, but decisions you make ends up with how much money you have, right?
Yeah. We've all faced the equivalent of not drawing money for sure, for sure.
I think
The,
there's no doubt.
there's a good story about Robert Fuller booking, and I think maybe it's Jerry said it, but somebody said it, but Robert standing there and there's nobody in the house, and somebody walks up to Fuller and said, "Man, he can't." And Fuller said, or somebody said, "It can't get any worse." And Fuller said, "Yeah, it can." And that was kind of the end of Robert Fuller.
And he was fired. There's no doubt
Hey,
about it.
Gail.
Hey, Crazy Gail, what is going on? I don't see Crazy Gail on there. Mine's not going all the way to the bottom. I love me some Crazy Gail. So we're talking about toward the end of 1979. They made a mistake in about October because about not quite a year, Lawler had been a babyface. They switched him heel. It did not draw as much as they accepted. Lawler just had more fun as a heel, and he wanted to switch heel, and they switched him heel, and he brought in Jimmy Hart to be his manager. Now, there's no doubt about it. If even though that didn't draw any money, it showcased Jimmy Hart. And that you don't mirror your stuff, so that was backwards. We couldn't read that, by the way. We
No,
need
I
to
can't.
teach you how to mirror your camera.
I can't write backwards. Anyway, it says, "Hey, Gail." Pardon
Okay.
me.
Oh, I'm used to it. Lawler switched heel end of the year, and that was the year, end of the year 1979. So your thoughts, and we have about 4 minutes before we hit the break to come back with the 80s. Your thoughts on what we've talked about, especially 79, but year to year. Did you like that format going
I
year to year?
I love that format because you can see the territory develop, expand, contract, take a new direction, all the things that makes it fascinating. Where did Hart come from?
He was a Memphis guy, part of the Gentries, and
I
he was
knew he was that, but I didn't know how he got into wrestling. Was he a
he was
pal of
friends with
Lawler's?
Lawler, went to high school with Lawler, and then had come around and was at a lot of Lawler's matches on Monday night. And Lawler, Jimmy was in hard times, and Lawler said, "Why don't you be my manager?" And the rest is history. There's no doubt about it. Any more
Absolutely.
comments about '79 or any of the decade?
Well, it's just kind of seeing everything come together, and I don't really know. Um, I wish I had been there when Jarrett, took the territory over, what that looked like, how it all worked. But brilliance and never apparently missed a beat.
Didn't miss a beat at all. Hey, everybody, I just want to know, what do you guys think about this as we started it last week and we're going back to our roots, talking Memphis wrestling, and we're going year to year. We started in 1971 today, we did the 70s, and today we're going to kind of give you the best baby faces, best heels, best feud. We'll talk in depth about the 80s, and then next week we'll start off by going 80 through 89, and we'll do the same thing we did today. And I think that's just a wonderful format. Crazy Gail is showing up, and I love it that he is, or she is. I love me some Crazy Gail, who was glad to meet Pat in Jackson, Tennessee. Shane, I think you had dinner with Crazy Gail, did you not? Pat?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we were at the table next door. Yeah, the last night we were there.
That's fantastic. I wasn't invited, was I?
Uh, well, you certainly would have been invited, but you had been running for about 72 hours straight, so I think you went home, took a nap.
No, I didn't
But,
go to bed. I came home and packed up and then went downstairs and talked to BC Collins and talked wrestling and that sort of thing. Then Jimmy Baggett came out. Y'all came back from the bar or wherever out to eat or wherever you went. We did that. We are
that's
going to
right,
right
and got handsome Jimmy to the airport. That's right.
Shane Shane Oldham said Jerry Lawler did an interview where he said about the concession stand brawl that the owner said, "Please don't break the popcorn machine." That's
I've heard
legit.
that.
Al says was the 1978 match with Jerry Lawler and Bockwinkel where Bobby Heenan made his only Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis appearance. It absolutely was in their first match. BC Collins says he left his flip flops in the lobby that night that we took off for the airport, and he says his favorite flip flops. So what do we say? Bless his heart. We're going to take a break. Be back with the 80s. I'm Randy Hales. Tell the people that's in the cave who you are. Pat?
Do what?
This got over like a fart in church. I
Yeah,
said,
and you said the cave. I was thinking that Adam was in the cave.
I'm Randy Hales. Now you identify yourself,
I'm Pat Trammell.
and
I
it's
am Pat
that
Trammell from
that
Birmingham, Alabama.
that's easy. He's not a professional broadcaster, but he adds to this show. We'll be back in a minute.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hill and special guests.
Hour number 2, Talking Memphis Wrestling, Randy Hales and Pat Trammell. We'll start with this. I want to start with the year 1980, Pat. That is the year, that's 3 years after Jerry Jarrett took over. He took over from Nick Gulas and Roy Welch, started the company, and as we talked about 77, 78, 79, it was tremendous. However, something happened at the start of 80. Two things happened. First of all, it happened within a week of each other. The first thing that happened is something that could have meant the end of Jarrett Promotions, the end of Jerry Jarrett's wrestling company. Something dramatic happened. The next week, something happened that ended up the setup for going out of the business not happening. What is that threat that happened in 1980 that could have ended up costing Jerry Jarrett his business, Pat?
Was this when Lawler threatened to leave?
Nope.
Did he lose TV?
Nope. Never lost TV to as long as he owned it. Never. It is Lawler related, and it's big.
Lawler breaks his leg.
Yes, sir. Ring the bell. Give Pat Trammell the pony.
Yes, Lawler breaks his leg doing the one thing that Jarrett told him, please don't do.
As PJ answered that question before you did, and how bad is that? You're 200 miles from Memphis. PJ, how many miles is it from Thailand to Memphis, Tennessee? Research that. See how many miles, not kilometers or kilos or whatever the hell it is. That's the way. I don't know, but how far is it as Pat is doing that research? But that is how 1980. And so what is the thing a week later that happened that resulted in the company staying in business? What happened? Hey, Bob, what's happening to you? I appreciate you watching Talking Memphis Wrestling. What's the thing happened a week after the broken leg, the famous interview? Tell us what it was.
The promo with Jimmy Hart, where he says, when you have a racehorse and he breaks and you breaks his leg, you shoot it and get another one.
How about that? How about that? Now, next week, because I didn't research this because I just did the 70s, we'll do year to year, 80 through 89 next week as we start the show, and then we'll get in to a decade that had the good, the bad, the ugly, and the end in it in the 90s, for sure. And we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the 80s, absolutely, no doubt about it, and that will be a lot of fun today. And here we go, and we'll leave it up to the audience to agree or disagree. And these choices and these people that I say are my opinions, and we want to give everybody their chance for that deal. So, and before I tell you mine, I'm going to get the audience and Pat the opportunity. In the decade of the 80s, Pat, the most famous decade for Memphis wrestling, I believe, ever. So much video out there. Who was the best babyface of the 80s, Pat Trammell?
Well, I think in the history of Memphis wrestling and in the history of the 80s, there's no doubt it was Jerry Lawler. Although there was plenty of good ones that were often heels and baby faces at different times. You know, Dundee was a heel and a baby face. Handsome Jimmy was. Later in the decade was the introduction of Jeff to the territory. Lots of baby faces out there. Todd makes a good point. The Fabs as a tag team, nobody probably as over as those guys ever in Memphis anymore.
and we'll get to the tag team in just a minute. So let's finish up the best babyface. I think everybody agree that it was Jerry Lawler. Honorable mention to to Superstar Bill Dundee, to Handsome Jimmy Valiant, to Austin Idol, to Dutch Mantell. Starting in 1986, certainly you have to say Jeff Jarrett. I believe we all agree the best babyface in the 80s, Jerry Lawler. The best heels, the best heel, Heel, the best heel. Who would you give it to in the 80s? To me, there's only one choice.
There's only one choice, and he carried the territory for 6 to 8 months. Uh, Ended up, carrying a lot of the Kaufman feud. That's Jimmy Hart, no question about it.
There is no doubt. Honorable mention, this might surprise you, this first guy, Bill Dundee. Switch Bill in 1983, a heel, plus he had a run in 86 and 87. Just tremendous, tremendous, tremendous. So I give it to Jimmy Hart. Honorable mention, Bill Dundee. Also, Austin Idol, Terry Funk, Tommy Rich, and Eddie Gilbert as honorable mentions there. So, what do you think? Certainly, we have to, as Todd Alexander gives it to Buddy Landell or Eddie uh, Gilbert. And I think in the 80s, you just have to look at who drew money. And Richard is right. Dream Machine is a great heel. But who drew the most money for the longest period of time? I think it was certainly Jimmy Hart, but second, I would think it was Bill Dundee. I
Oh,
really do, for sure.
yeah, the heel in that feud with Lawler. I'll tell you though, the Dream Machine. We don't. Well, there's not enough stuff out there, and we don't talk about him enough, and I don't talk about him enough. But it was certainly such a talent taken away too soon by the same thing that takes a lot of guys away. And I think about Buddy, and I think about Eddie Gilbert, and what we lost because of their issues. But Shane's right. No mention of Randy Savage as a heel in Memphis.
And I think he happens to be up there, even though his run wasn't that long, but it was about a year, and you're absolutely 100%. And Dave's saying, what about Jackie Fargo drawing? And I don't really understand that deal. Now, Fargo was in and out as a special recurring guest star in the 80s. He hadn't been since the mid 70s a full time wrestler there, without a doubt. Let's talk about tag teams. I think it's been mentioned the fabulous ones. I think best babyface tag team, there is no doubt. And the honorable mention would be the Rock and Roll Express. What do you think, Pat?
I'll tell you, the notion that the Rock and Roll Express are a runner up to anybody as a tag team drawing is hard to believe. But the Fabs were such a different. I'm trying to think of the word. There had never been anything put together like the Fabs before. And Jared has told the story on his podcast, and I've heard it from him personally about coming in and seeing one of his daughters watching MTV with all the spangles, all the tight pants, all that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out something to do with Steve Kern and Stan, and hooking them up with a video was just sheer genius.
Now, Dave Channel was referring to Jackie Fargo drawing crowds, and he drew a lot of sellouts. The biggest box office draw in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, no doubt, was Jerry Lawler. No doubt. Fargo drew a lot of money. The first sellout at the Mid South Coliseum. This is where I'm going to disagree with Todd, even though his answer is not far off. I think is the heel tag team as far as longevity without a doubt, as far as drawing money for a longer period of time, I think it's the Moondogs. I think it's absolutely the Moondogs. And I think the Shepherders are honorable mention. The best working tag team of heel tag team of the 80s, without a doubt, was Bobby Eaton and Coco Ware, Sweet Brown Sugar. Without a doubt, one of the best heel tag teams I've ever seen in my entire life. Underrated tag team is Danny Davis and Ken Wayne, the Nightmares. There's the Grapplers. There's just so many more. Sheep herders are right up there. There is no doubt. Again, Idle and Rich as well. There's been so many great tag teams. To have a great heel tag team, you have to have a great babyface tag team, and vice versa. One doesn't work without another. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. My favorite heel tag team, maybe ever, Sugar, Coco, and Bobby Eaton.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
favorite, my favorite heel team of the '70s, I would have to be Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey. My favorite babyface tag team, several. I liked the Gibsons. I liked Tommy and Eddie Gilbert. I liked Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert. But nobody drew more money in Memphis, Tennessee territory than Jerry Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto, especially in Louisville.
In
Nobody.
Louisville.
Well, the entire territory. The entire
it,
territory. There's no.
it, but I mean, Jerry Jarrett could have been mayor of Louisville up until the day he died, I understand.
Richard Hood says, what about Dennis Condrey and Dr. David Schultz? Very good tag team. Wasn't together a long period of time. Didn't draw as much as some of the others. And they were a great tag team. Great, fantastic. Really good. But they didn't draw the money Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson did. They just didn't. And the long term wise. What do you think on the debate with the Moondogs? That my answer and Todd disagreeing with me that it's the sheep herders.
I think it's personal preference on it. I mean, they both had a similar gimmick. I tell you that for all the gimmick that they had, all four of those guys could really work, and they really worked well together. I mean, I'm like you. My personal or just my personal preference of those would be the Moondogs. But the sheep herders were certainly drew money and put on a show.
Now, Todd Rich says the Blonde Bombers were great, and I agree they were great for sure, but we're talking about the 80s, and their main money drawing run was in the 70s for sure. Todd loves Jonathan Boyd. He bled buckets, and that's true. Probably one of the biggest assholes I've ever met in the wrestling business. He
I
was
tell you what,
he was a
that's saying
prick.
a lot. That's saying
Yes,
a
it
lot,
is.
isn't it?
He was a prick. Nobody liked him. But he understood how to be a heel because he was a heel in life and he knew how to draw money. No doubt about it. Frank says Dirty Rhodes and Ron Bass was a lot of different masked heel tag teams, and that's Don Bass, not Ron Bass, Frank. David Smith says, I agree with Randy about the Moondogs. So that's all very interesting stuff. Best manager of the 80s? The question is the honorable mentions
Yeah, the
because,
best is who. Yeah, who's second?
yeah, go.
I,
Hart, number one. Go ahead, honorable mentions.
for me, Bruno.
I think you have to say Bruno, and I think before that, even though he was young in the business, I think you got to say Jimmy Cornette.
I think so too. I think so. But Jimmy did get he got a real push, and but yeah, I mean, I loved Bruno in the '80s.
Bo James made a comment agreeing with me about Jonathan Boyd, and I'm going to have you read it, Pat, as soon as you
John's
have him.
boy was exactly what RH said.
Right.
And let me say this, and I want to be careful how I say this. Uh, uh, Bo Bo does not throw criticism of people around lightly. He generally, uh, with me and with others, gives people the benefit of the doubt as to their goodness. So if he says it's exactly what you say, he's got to be worse than even you're saying.
He's a worker. He is a wrestler. He's a worker. I know exactly what he thinks about everybody. Everybody, without a doubt. He's just being honest here because it must have been bad. Here's the thing Todd Alexander says on the best managers. I'll give you a curveball. Wasn't here long enough, no doubt about it. Half our audience, I'm sure, don't know who Tux Newman is. But Tom Ernesto brought him in 85. He might have stayed 6 or 7 weeks at all. There's no way in the world he's on the running for the best managers in the 80s, without a doubt. I thought Tux was not good. And his son sometimes watched this show. His real name's Jeff Walton, Tux Noman, and he was a great guy. I didn't think he was very good in any way as a manager, as a person involved in creative office, not in Memphis, but in other territories. I think there's uh, uh, certainly no doubt about it. Adam says that Dr. Newman tried to direct Lance Russell a few times on the air. I'm surprised Lance didn't hit him with the freaking gimmick. Uh, what about Tojo as a manager? Tojo, one of the best heels ever. Absolutely. He
That
was,
Dave, you're on to something there.
and
Yeah.
Bob Scott was in the 90s. We are talking 80s right now. We'll get to Scott in the 90s.
Dave talks about Bruno. Bruno is an alderman in life. This is interesting. This is how good Bruno was. Bruno is a native, lifelong citizen, and on the board of aldermen of Walls, Mississippi. So, with that Northeast Street swag.
Now, he's not a native of Mississippi.
He told me he was. Said he'd
Well,
been
he
there for
lied.
40 years. All
He's a,
right.
that's not, 40 years is not being raised. He was raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Okay. Well, he's gotten a southern accent. And you're right, David. Good call on and Dave. Good call on Tojo.
Know about Adam? What are we talking about? Mark Curtis? Mark Curtis and downtown Bruno live close to each other in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So be interesting what people think. And of course, I have the figures in front of me, so I have that advantage over Pat or the audience. And this is again relative, and it's hard to without knowing how the business did. You just don't know. If unless you know the years they booked, the years they didn't, for sure. The best booker of the 80s. Now, in the 70s, I gave it with no even second place. I gave it to Jerry Jarrett. Who's my best booker of the 80s?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming Jerry booked and Lawler booked, so it would have to be one of those two. And I think Lawler probably did more of the big money drawing angles.
1983, the biggest money year in the history of Memphis wrestling. Lawler booked the year, and there's no doubt. So Jerry Lawler is who I named the booker of the decade because he had other years that did very good as well. And Jerry Jarrett had some good years in the 80s. And me and Jerry Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett, the three of us, had a very good year or two together that three of us were doing that thing. Who did I give the worst booker to? And again, remember I told you like with Robert Fuller didn't do good in Memphis, but he did good other people. So who would you say I will name as the worst booker? And I'll give you, I've already mentioned his name once when I was talking about Tom Ernesto. When I was talking about Tex Newman, it's Tom Ernesto.
It's got, and it has to be, Tom Ernesto did good booking in Atlanta for sure. But
Puerto Rico and Los Angeles as well.
yeah, yeah. So but I mean, Randy, Memphis is just different. The people are different. The crowd's different. What it means to people are different. And I think you have to, I think you have to grow up with it to be any good at it, frankly.
Now, Dave Channel is saying, I know he went to WCW. Pat, do you know who he is?
I think he's talking about. He's either talking about. I think he's talking about Dundee.
Yeah, Dundee went to WCW, was never the head booker, but he was part of the creative team. And I think it was in 1987. As Shane says, Randy booked one of my favorite matches, the boot match between Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert. And that was the time Jerry Jarrett was the booker and me and Jeff was the assistant. Jerry Jarrett was in Florida for about a month. And that was my deal, totally, 100% with input from Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert as well. Absolutely, without a doubt.
So did Dundee ever book Memphis, Randy? I know he booked for Watts.
Yes, he was the booker um, several different times over the years.
Okay, okay. I think that's what Dave's trying to get to.
All right, for sure. Good conversations. Um, there's no
Al
doubt.
brings something up interesting. You
Go
didn't
ahead.
see. Well, Al just mentions that he didn't like that Ernesto booked uh, 2 out of 3 fall matches on the Saturday shows. I assume that was TV. That, and it's interesting because you didn't see a lot of that, or I did not ever see a lot of that in Memphis. But on Birmingham TV, and I don't know how it was before Jerry took over, but on Birmingham TV on Saturday night, uh, there were tag team 2 out of 3 fall matches, not unregularly.
Now, on the Jarrett TV format, they did out a lot of expiration of tag matches that could go one fall, two fall, three fall, how much TV time remaining. I don't remember a lot of 2 out of 3 fall matches in the Jarrett era. In the Ernesto era, it's kind of unfair because Ernesto came in with a great resume, did about 3 weeks worth of television, and it went to hell. Jerry Jarrett came back, and even though Ernesto remained as the official booker, Jerry Jarrett was laying out and writing those televisions without a doubt, for sure. Cristobal asked, was Oliver Humperdinck, ever part of the Memphis wrestling scenes? And not at all. Absolutely. I don't remember him ever being there. Just fantastic thing. Pat, do you think that sometime, do you think our audience would be interested if we took the 70s or the 80s or a certain year or whatever and have you host a best and worst of 70s Georgia?
I, I don't know. I mean, I want to talk about Memphis wrestling, and I think they do too. I've forgotten all that stuff, man.
Well, y'all switched the script for me last week because a lot of that conversation turned into be the Nick era of Memphis wrestling. By the 80s, the Nick era was over. So as far as I don't think you can do a best heel, best babyface, best booker, best anything for Nick in the 80s. Do you?
No. I don't think so. What
Go ahead.
I was Frank had asked about Ernesto and Jody Hamilton. Were they the assassins? Do you remember that, Randy?
Yes, no doubt. They were
Okay. I knew
uh,
Jody was.
the assassins and did a great, great job, and there is no doubt about it. I mean, for
Wrestling fans, a night to remember. Saturday, September 21st, the Picture Perfect Event Center, Jackson, Tennessee. Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame ceremony comes to Jackson for the first time ever. The Rivalry of the Ages presentation to Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. Also, Handsome Jimmy Valiant, the Rock and Roll Express, Danny Davis, and tons more. Exclusive meet and greet at 3:30. Event to follow. Go to MemphisWrestlingHallOfFame.com to purchase tickets. Saturday, September 21st, Picture Perfect Event Center, 2310 North Highland, Jackson. A night to remember.
Hi, everybody. Michael St. John talking Memphis Wrestling. We're right here in Jackson, Tennessee at the Event Center. The big night to remember, Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame induction ceremony. I've known this man.
Great stuff without a doubt in That's the thing about this new deal we have, Pat, is that I don't even know how that happened. As I put a video on and I couldn't get us back on, and now I have both of us there, and that thing on the screen right now. I have no idea how to get it off of there at all. People, you just, again, this is a brand new version. I don't know what the hell I did, and I don't know how to get this up there, but Pat, I'm going to have you check the comments and let's talk about what's going on if there's anything new.
It's Memphis Wrestling. Anything can happen, and usually does. I've just everybody was enjoying about our commercials there, but Shane brings something up, and I don't think Rick Rude came to the. I don't think Rick Rude came to the territory until the early '90s. Is that right, or was he there in the '80s?
What's that question again?
Rick Rude.
1983, I think.
Okay.
Maybe 84. Maybe 84.
Okay.
I don't know the name of that theme music, but I think Adam probably would know if he took a little break, if he won't be back on. And folks, everybody talking about the commercial, what's going on. This is a new format on Restream, and I wanted to air a video. And once I had that video going, I couldn't get us back on. So that was the problem. And I think we got it again.
All right.
And there's that. And then we will get Pat back on here real quick. And let's do that. And we'll have
Okay.
Pat talk. Man, I need to quit hitting these damn buttons.
Well, the control table's gotten a lot different than it used to be, hadn't it?
Can you tell on your end? But you don't really see what we see, do you?
I don't. I see what you're seeing right now. That's all I ever see. I see myself, or I see you, or I see Adam when he comes on, and I think I see what most of our friends here see. So,
all right. What did you think of the show today?
I like going down memory lane. I learned something new every time. There were people I had not thought of, and angles I had not thought of. I'm enjoying this very much, very, very much, going through the decades.
We'll get out of here early tonight, Pat. Last steak from Pat Trammell.
Always good to be with our friends. Always good to see you. The deeper we dive, the more I realize just how uniquely special the Memphis wrestling territory was, and how every time something happened that might push the territory in another direction, somebody else shows up, steps up, and just becomes a special part of the soundtrack and the story of what we love so much.
Thank you for being with us. It's been nice to have me and you together again, just me and you. We had a great, great, great show. We'll be back Monday on the Power Hour. We did a double header of Power Hour last night. Next week, we are back to one show, but excited about that as we are getting into the last stages, about 20 more shows to do. Guys, I appreciate all everybody does. Now, I'm going to say bye, not knowing whether Adam is on or not, and I'll say bye for Pat, and then when I say bye, if Adam doesn't roll the close, I'll roll the close. For Pat Trammell and for Team Hales, and I want to look because we have one more comment here. Pat, that is Cristobal says, great show. Ahmad says, great show. I've been helping my daughters with homework, 5 and 7 years old. Shane Odom says, great show tonight. Thank you for all the memories and Al thought. Great history lessons tonight. PJ says, great show as always. Thomas says, great show as well. Do you think we got the show written? Do we think we got the show done? Do you think we done a job tonight, Pat?
I think we done a job. I think we drew some money, and I think we're ready for the next week. Ahmad, hug those girls for their Uncle Pat.
All right. We appreciate it very much. And for Pat Trammell, I'm Randy Hales. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Live from TV5 Wrestling Action, 11 o'clock Saturday.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales and special guests.